Well, welcome to. I think this is our fifth episode of oh yep, number 5. Why teachers write. Super excited to have new faces and old friends joining us once again this week. This week we have two really amazing fellows who have been with us for quite some time. And while people are coming on, if you are a script fellow, go ahead and update your name like I did. I have Nicole09, so you can kind of see the years people went through if you are, whether you're a script fellow or a fellow from a different writing project. If you are not a fellow of a writing project, we're super happy you're here as well. You can just put in where you're from. So it's kind of exciting to hear where all the different people are joining us from. We've had a pretty good representation from across the country, which has been kind of fun to see. Wonderful. Bloomington, Indiana. Welcome, Richard. Wonderful to have you here. Great. And actually, while people are doing that, you can also put in the chat if I'm kind of curious, just as another piece, just so we ask this we'll ask this later in an exit interview, but I'm kind of curious just to hear what brought you here today. Is it a friend? Is it someone who you were in ISI with, a summer institute with? Is it just because you love script? What brought you here today? Just go ahead and put it in chat. Just it's kind of fun to hear why people are showing up for these, and it helps us to think about what kinds of experiences we might offer up in the future as we journey down this, having more access to digital spaces that we get together in. Hello. Great. Oh, great. Nancy Lee is in a long-time writing group with Lois and Kim. Love this. Right Now Teacher Studio. I don't know what that is, but it sounds amazing and I want to know more about it. Great. Wonderful. Welcome everyone. We're all glad you're here. Okay. Oh, Right Now, that's the NWP. Yeah, great. So good on Luis for getting that posted on there. Thank you. For those of you who haven't met, while we're just kind of getting started, I want to make sure that if you've not yet met, many of you, most of you have met Tim Dewar, who is the Southwest Writing Project Director, also the California Writing Project Executive Director. And he is, Tim Dewar. Then we also have on the call another really important person to Script's day-to-day functioning, and that's Luis Narvaez. And Luis has been with us for just over a year now. So grateful for his presence and for his talents and just general all-around wonderfulness. So if you see e-blasts coming out, or if you see if you are someone who ends up getting paid from Script, or if you're someone who emails Script at any point and kind of just like randomly reaches out, he's the reason why things are those things are happening. So we just want to make sure he gets all the appreciation he's due. Wonderful. Well, it is 4:03. I think we can go ahead and really get ourselves started here. And because my internet went down for a moment there, my agenda went down. Just 1 second. Okay, it's moving up. All right. So I am deeply honored to get to introduce our two fellows for today's Why Teachers Write series. And these two in particular, I have to say, when I started I went to UC Santa Barbara, and that's where I was introduced to the South Coast Writing Project. During the teaching program, you had in my time, there was a 3-week kind of like a little mini script, a little mini summer session where we got to explore as just baby beginner teachers what it meant to write in a classroom. It was my very favorite thing I ever did in my writing or my teaching program, and so I rushed back to Script as soon as I could and became a fellow. But during that time, I remember, I actually can't even count the number of times someone referenced Lois Klein. your name came up constantly. You were like a legend in script land, as far as I was concerned. So when I saw your name come up and I was going to get introduced to you today, I felt very honored. Again, our two fellows today are Lois Klein and Kimbrough. Oh my goodness!
Ernest, like Hemingway, Ernest.
Yes, yeah. No, I'm just not able to talk today. Kimbrough Ernest. So Lois is the author of 3 books of poetry: Naming Water in 1998, A Soldier's Daughter in 2008, and Blooming Wild, So Close to Home in 2013. She became a script fellow in 2004. She organizes a favorite poem project in Santa Barbara. That's a monthly event. And she teaches through the California Poets in Schools program. And I think that's I think, Lois, where I like heard about you over and over again. And she also leads private writing groups. Lois actually went to Tufts University, where she got a BA in English and education. And then she also got an MA in psychology from Antioch University. I can't tell you how many times as a teacher I thought, man, I really wish I had actually become a psychiatrist before I became a teacher, because I would have had a lot more kids.
Yeah.
Kimbrough is a poet and teacher who lives in Ventura, California. She has worked in several areas, including software illustration for flight simulation and ESL teaching, because those two things go together naturally. Before she became an elementary school teacher. She also attended SCWriP in 2009, where she was inspired by Barry Spacks, an esteemed poet and presenter who is sadly no longer with us. But he inspired her to dive into poetry. Soon after, she joined a writing group started by Lois Klein. And after retiring from teaching elementary school in 2020, she also began teaching with California Poets in the Schools, as Lois does. She has been published in several anthologies, including Rare Feathers, Poems on Birds and Art, To Give Life a Shape, Solo Novo, Psalms of Cinder and Salt, Askew, and the Pepper Lane Review in both their first and second volume. And more than just being 2 fellows, as you've heard, these 2 fellows happen to have been in a writing group together for a long time. So after attending SCWriP in 2009, Kim saw an announcement for Lois's writing group in an issue of Postscript, which is for those of you who aren't part of SCWriP, it's a publication we put out a couple of times a year that is kind of a collection of lots of different types of writing from across all of our fellows who submit. It's kind of a curated piece that we bring together as a place where we can continue to celebrate each other's writing. Well, anyway, she saw this announcement. She joined the group, and it's continued until this day. She and Lois have had a deep and meaningful friendship, and Kimbrough kind of considers Lois to be one of her mentors. And in 2020, Kim joined her as a poet and teacher for the Santa Barbara County California Poets in the Schools. So I think Kimbrough, and actually, do you prefer to go by Kim, or do you go by Kimbrough most of the time?
Either one, it's whatever. Yeah, either one is fine. Kim is fine.
All right, that's fine. I would say that, like many fellows, what you're hearing in Kim and Lois's story is that SCWriP can not only shape your teaching career, but it can help shape your friendships and help shape your life in some respects. So today we're going to get to hear from these 2 amazing authors and just learn more about what makes them tick, their process tick. And I'm now going to turn it over to Lois and Kim so they can take it away.
Well, thank you, Nicole, for that beautiful introduction.
I would just like to thank Tim and Nicole and Louise for this fabulous series they're promoting, and I have learned so much from the first 4. Looking forward to all of them. I just think this is so special. I think it's going to put California on the map. Okay.
Finally. So Lois, I know a lot of people here already know so much about you, but for those who don't know, tell us when and how did poetry find you?
Well, I'll start with how poetry lost me, which was in high school and college when poetry was just critique. As Billy Collins said, you tie it to a chair and whip it. I first got an inkling of it at an adult ed class led by Anne Lowenkoff, who's a writer of mostly memoir. And I sat in that class when you could actually sit in a class, and people would be writing pages and pages, and I'd have something about that long. That was it. And she came around and she said, "Lois, I think your route is poetry." And it kind of stunned me, having not much background in poetry at all. But I kind of, took the reins and started writing. And I think one thing I learned from her was that, well, I had to get over the fear of not doing it right or not satisfying someone else, whatever. And she said the words that come first could be anybody's. The words that come next are your own. And that was such a support to me and such a helpful thing to hear.
Yeah, I like that. So as Nicole mentioned, you were a therapist for many years. Did that lead you into writing, or has that influenced your writing?
I was writing a little bit before that, but it has definitely influenced my writing. The phrase I just said, and next the words you write are your own. And I just had to keep going with the thought that I have something to say. I have a voice. And that's a hard thing to remember. And I was already like 40 years old at the time. So I had some history of obstacles, but I think the process of therapy, which helps you go deep, was very helpful for my writing.
And then you did SCWriP in 2004. What impact did that have on your writing?
It was a wonderful experience. I think it showed me how important a community of writers is, that you're not writing in isolation all the time. It also helped that, in the Summer Institute, every morning of it started with about half an hour, maybe 20 minutes of journaling. And the mantra, just keep your pencil moving, was what we were challenged to do. And that's been hard for me. I'm a little more left brain. And so that experience really set the pattern. That was 5 weeks of 4 days a week, journaling for every morning. And I've been able to do that since then. And that's been a real gift.
And what led you to start a writing group?
It's a what and a who. I hope you can see Nancy Lee. She's in the middle of my screen. Hi, Nance. There was a poetry retreat, like a weekend retreat at La Casa de Maria. I don't even know how many years ago, early 2000s. And I presented a workshop and Nancy came to it. And I had known Nancy years before because our sons were in school together. So that workshop felt good. And Nancy afterwards said to me, "You have to start one of those. You have to start one of those right now." So I took her up on it, and I did start that writing group. And I think it was, do you remember what year that was, Nancy? No.
I think it was around maybe 2008 or 9. Maybe, yeah, something like that. But can you explain to people who don't know how our group is different from a lot of other writing groups?
Sure. Our group is not a critique group, and it's not really a workshop group. We don't bring a poem already written or a piece of memoir already written. We do our writing right there. And then we usually have a prompt or a poem to jump off from. And we usually have 2 or 3 prompts or poems. And then we read aloud. And at first that was a little bit, we didn't know each other that well. Now we know each other really, it's been 12 years. We know each other really well. And we've always made the group a very safe place. We honor confidentiality. And we also ask that the members don't start with, I didn't know what to write with this, or this is really terrible, but we just encourage people to read as comfortably as they can. And it's interesting. I think it was either Erica or Elizabeth, I think it was Erica maybe, who said the last time that when you write and read it aloud, that reading aloud is actually the first publication of that work. And that kind of startled me because I hadn't thought of that, but it's true.
Yes.
Your words go out into the ether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of publication, in addition to many anthologies, you have 3 books of poetry, and the first is Naming Water. How did that book come together and come to be published?
That was basically a chapbook, which I designed and a friend of mine printed. I'll show you the cover. These are no longer, these are extinct now, these books, but I just want to read you the foreword of this very first book. It came about because I had written a number of poems, and friends encouraged me to gather them, I guess you'd say. And I had a friend at the time who had actually a publishing company, very low key, called Knock and Clash Press. And his printing press was in the basement. And he said, okay, I'll print that. And then another friend did the artwork for it. And that's how it happened. What I say at the beginning is, trying to write a poem is like breaking into a house. You throw yourself against a closed door. Just open it. Let the words come in on the breeze. And if you can do that as a writer, it's a gift. Yeah.
Yes. You also started the favorite poem reading that meets monthly in Santa Barbara. How did you start that, and how, tell everybody what it is if they don't know?
Okay. The favorite poem project was something started by Robert Pinsky when he was National Poet Laureate in 1998. And his purpose was to have people be able to share poetry, not their own, but within a community, and to pick a favorite poem on that particular night. And so the person who really was provided the push for this was Barry Spacks, and I probably will be mentioning his name more often. He was the first poet laureate in Santa Barbara, and he was an amazing poet. He taught at the College of Creative Studies. And the best part of Barry was he was so inclusive. He was so welcoming to people, even people who were, just starting out and whose poetry someone else might have said, it's a little sophomoric, you should do something else. He was right there mentoring every poet in Santa Barbara. And so he liked the idea of doing that and asked me if I would host. He had a friend who owned a restaurant, the Blue Agave, at the time. And so we met upstairs at the Blue Agave. And Barry had the same chair with a glass of Guinness. And we went, we did it. The only problem was there was a lot of noise coming up from the bar downstairs. And the screen you see behind me is one that I bought to try to get that noise to stay downstairs. Didn't really work, but I got a screen out of it.
Mm-hmm. And your second book of poetry.
Hang on one sec, because I realized I didn't really say anything logistical. So the favorite poem reading happens monthly on the third Tuesday of the month, and we're very lucky now we're so appreciate the library who gave us a space to have that reading and is sponsoring it on Zoom during this COVID time. So it's once a month, and people come when they can, and the group is especially warm and a wonderful poetry experience because there's no ego. People are not reading their own poem and hoping that people like it and all that. It's a chance to read a poem from a poet you love, and we don't talk about it. We don't ask questions about it. It is just this. It's like a sphere of poetry.
Beautiful.
And if anyone is interested in that, check the library website because it's always in there, and you'll have a chance to register, sign up, and all that. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask you to read from a poet that I love. Your second book of poetry is A Soldier's Daughter, and it deals a lot with the death of your father at a very early age. And maybe before you read, you could tell us how that came to be published.
The earlier question about how poetry influenced my writing, this book is really a result of that. I was looking at the issue that I had never looked at in my family of my dad, who was in the Army in the Second World War and died when I was not even 2 yet. So I wrote about what it's like to have a father that you don't know at all, that you don't remember at all, and the family that resulted in making. So I had no goal of publishing those poems. They were just my personal working through, and they kind of went in a drawer. And I got a call from someone who was in an organization that I knew nothing about, which was called American World War II Orphans Network. That's what we were called. We were called orphans, which in itself was very strange and disturbing. And he said, you're writing about what happened to all of us across the country who are in this group. And he asked me to read some of the poems at the next conference, which was in Arizona. And I had at that time been thinking about putting them putting them together. And as I did that, it seemed more and more like they would be a book. And then, of course, I was talking to Barry Spax about it, and he said, let me see the manuscript. And I think it might work with WordTech Communications, which is my publisher. They have an imprint called Turning Point, and it is books focused on narratives of people's lives. And so I did the editing, which, by the way, I love editing. I know I'm unusual in that, but sometimes I'm even surprised by what I wrote. And it lets me fill in the blanks, and it lets me sit with the poem and kind of sit with myself. So I did submit it to Turning Point, and they said, okay, yeah, we like it. So as publishing goes, a year and a half later, in 2008, it was actually a book, and this is what the book looks like.
And Lois, would you read a poem from that?
Sure. I'll preface this by saying that anyone whose father has been missing from their life, especially early, for any reason, it influences relationships with men, kind of from then on. So this poem reflects that. I'm going to take a drink of water first. It's called My Father's Ghost. My father's ghost is everywhere. He is the bullet I dodge, the landmine I tiptoe around. All the men on earth come trooping along with him in their uniforms of distress, with their smiles and bayonets. They could invade at any hour. I'm readying my armor.
I love that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I should mention too, our writing group has also self-published 2 anthologies, Pepper Lane Review 1 and 2. And I have these, you can see. And also talking about our writing group, we stopped meeting in person during COVID, but eventually we started meeting on Zoom.
You know what? I would love to hear you read one of your poems from the Pepper Lane Review.
Oh,
Would you do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yes, I forgot we were going to do that. This poem, I didn't originally write about poetry, but it seems that it could be sort of a metaphor for how poetry sometimes comes. It's called Unbidden. And it came to me late in life, unbidden, this glimpse of tenderness, fierce and fleeting as a teenage crush, it came to me like a soft breeze that I could not schedule or direct, just only nudge open a window and allow in.
Thank you. It's so good to hear that.
Thank you. So back to our writing group, we're going to actually ask everybody in a moment to do a little bit of writing if you would like to. But first I wanted to tell you how we adapted our writing on Zoom. At first we were very reluctant, skeptical, but then we actually developed this kind of warm-up technique and grew to really like it. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you're game, is just take a moment and write in the chat one or maybe a few words. It could be something that's on your mind. It could be a phrase from a poem. It could be something you see out the window. Don't think too much about it. Just type it into the chat, just 1 to 3 words. So if everybody would go ahead and do that, or anybody who would like to participate, then I'll tell you what we'll do with that. So great, we have our first one. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, C. Okay. Great, great. Wonderful. All right, and so now I'm just going to read what people have. I think Richard's was the first one. Okay. And you can keep adding if you haven't put anything yet, and I'll just get to it. Delta Terror, violin, long summer evenings. There he was, standing in line with his red cap on. Weather the weather, hope, my horse, peace, effervescent, loving, windy, sassafras, fog or smoke, smoke or fog, morning doves, a broom, beyond control, embrace, pasture, transcend, melody. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so here's what we do with this. In our writing group, we take any of these phrases or lines, mix them any way we want. You might just take one and it sparks an idea and you write about it. You might take many. And what's happened in our writing group that really surprised us is that people will take the same lines, and the way that they interweave them, it becomes a completely different piece of writing. And it kind of takes the pressure off because you're using somebody else's line. So if it stinks, it's not your fault. No, it's not going to stink. Everyone comes up with something which is actually original, even though you're using someone else's line. And it's a kind of cento, which is an ancient form of poetry that uses lines from other people's poems. So I'm going to give you just maybe 5 minutes. Let's do 4. And I'll give you 5 just in case you need to go get writing materials. But just have fun with it. You can, as I said, use as many or as few as you'd like. And then we'll see if anyone wants to share. So have fun. Okay, is there anyone who would like to share? Could hear 1 or 2.
Just raise your hand, and also if you like part of the poem, you don't have to read the whole thing. Nancy, I think you had your hand
I'll
up.
share. Since I'm so used to doing this.
I know, it's great.
This is like the backstroke.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the morning doves still flying through that fog. Or was it smoke? Could it be smoke? Or maybe it's everything I see now through the Delta Terror. Whether it's the weather or whether it was that dream of him in that red cap. But today I will transcend my tattered broom of doom, and I will listen as the neighbor gives us an embrace, practicing her violin through an open window.
Oh, wonderful. Oh,
Marvelous.
all right. Could we hear one more, maybe?
Richard. Richard, I see your hand.
Richard, you're muted right now.
That was purposeful.
Okay.
My horse plays the violin in the pasture. Morning doves fly on a broom. The fog standing in his red cap as peace descends on long summer evenings.
Oh, just beautiful. And as you can see, some of the same lines, but they are so different. They have such a different feeling and focus. I love it. So
Nicole, I saw your hand up, Nicole. Let's have one more.
okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
You're muted, Nicole.
Yes, I was like, shuffling between the screens where I'd written in the screens where. Okay. Beyond control and transcend, embrace the melody of the pastures and morning doves surrounding us like smoke or fog, a violin on long summer evenings.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Love it. Yeah. So any of you who are writing on Zoom, this is a good little warm up to get people going. So, all right. So I was really moved, Lois, when I recently reread your poem after his wedding, about your son's wedding, because my son recently got married. And I see that your beautiful daughter is here today. And so I'm curious, how do your children and your grandchildren feel about your writing, especially when you write about them?
Good question. I have 3 children and a little nest of grandchildren. My children all have a different response, and I think anyone who has children understands that they take in things differently. So my daughter Jenny reflects back to me things that touch her or make her wonder, or questions that she has. Next in line is Josh, who's the strong silent type. And I get some smiles from him. And next in line, the third is Andy. These are all people who are now, past the half-century mark. Andy has a tender heart, and he totally supports what I write. He's not a writer, but he's someone who has feelings inside and understands that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it was Jenny.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. But I will add that A Soldier's Daughter was written after my mother passed in 1994. Some of those poems I know she would not have liked, and she would have thought they were disrespectful. And I put them in anyway, because a poem doesn't have to be the literal truth. A poem is the emotional truth.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone, I'm not sure my mother would have understood that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. You met your partner, Ron, and I see Ron is here today. You met Ron relatively late in life, but it seems to me that your relationship has really affected your writing. A lot of the poems in Blooming Wild, So Close to Home, are about that relationship. And there's a lot of love and sensuality that comes through in the poems that you write about him. Would you read a poem from that book?
Sure. And this book is I'm not sure what I was going to say. Oh dear.
Well, one thing I didn't ask you about the publishing. Would you like to explain how that came about?
Okay. I sent the manuscript to Turing Point, who had published my first book. And apparently, very often, if they take a poet on, they'll take the next book as well. And so that's what happened. The only problem with Turing Point, and kudos to my daughter Jenny, they designed a cover that, I mean, you would not want to open the book. So Jenny is just wonderful with design and graphics and color. And she designed this. Ron, my partner, did some line drawings in it, which pleases me. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes. And now if you could read a poem from the book, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. This poem is called New Terrain. Rain today. This bed where he and I slept lies open. The impression of his body whispered on the sheets. To return there, to hear him say, I want to hold you, is all I wish on this morning. A voyage back to the land, to the island of us. He and I, sole inhabitants of its lush heat, its deep shade, shipwrecked and glad of it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You started teaching with California Poets in the Schools in 2001. Tell us about that experience.
That's been a wonderful experience in my life. It's kept me in touch with young people. It's kept me in touch with the creativity that's coming up, behind us, so important. And I feel very strongly that kids in school now and have, the past couple decades, they've been taught a lot of facts and just logic, and their right brain has been somewhat ignored, I'll say. And so I get a chance to go into the classroom and to the last child in all these 20 years, they have been so glad to see me, partly because I give them this chance to write, and partly because it feels a little bit sort of like recess, They get to share with their buddies, and they so often really go deep. I had an experience, I'm looking at the time. I had an experience in one class. We sit in a circle to share because it closes, the energy. And a fifth grader, the writing prompt was, write about someone important to you, someone special, someone who's had an impact on you. And this young man, this 11-year-old boy, wrote about the child that his mother miscarried. And all of us were just, you could just feel the love and compassion in the circle. And I do also give credit to the teachers who make their classes safe enough for children to share like that.
Yeah, and I think you had a Chinese proverb that you like to start out with in the classroom, is that right?
Yeah, the first session, and sometimes more than the first, I put this quote, a Chinese proverb on the board. And it is, a bird doesn't sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. And Yeah, I want the children, the students to know right away that song that they have inside them, this is the place where they can play with it, work with it, interact with that inside song. Yeah.
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 I love that. And you also, I know you've written several poems about your students, but would you share a poem that you've written about your students in that program?
Yeah. I started out teaching at Mountain View, and this is a poem that I wrote maybe 5 years into teaching, and I've now I read it to every class at the end. It's called, and it's taken from a Carl Sandburg poem, the form of it and the rhythm of it. Okay. It's called I Have Thought of You, Young Poets. I have thought of your faces, eyes bright with images, hands waving ideas on your fingertips. I have thought of your frowns of concentration, your smiles of discovery, your journeys pressed onto paper. I have thought of all the stories wrapped inside you, each one a star in an endless galaxy. I have wanted you to shine like that. I know that you always will. Most of the time, then I start to cry. Today I made it through.
It's a good thing to cry. It's good for them
Yeah.
to see that you care so much. Yes.
Yeah.
And so we started this, or we titled this interview, Why Write Poetry Anyway? And so as we're getting close to the end, how would you answer that question?
It's a big question. It's a really big question. I'm going to read something written by Naomi Shihab Nye, who's a wonderful poet and is a poet teacher in the schools in San Francisco. And she says, we hear so many voices every day swirling around us, and a poem makes us slow down and listen carefully to a few things we have heard deep inside. For me, poems usually begin with true things, people, experiences, quotes, but quickly ride off into that other territory of imagination, which lives alongside us as much as we will allow in a world that likes to pay too much attention to facts.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's not acknowledged by anyone, but we're hoping to spread that word around.
And we were talking, I think, before everybody got on too, about how healing writing is. And yeah, certainly we felt that yesterday in our writing group with so many horrible things going on in the world that it really helps to write about it.
And it also helps to share it, because in doing that, it we share the burden.
Yeah.
And more and more these days, we realize that a sense of self, a sense of with others is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's next for you, Lois?
I don't know. I kind of am playing it by ear, but there are a few people I really wanted to thank, and somehow my Zoom only has 7 people on it, but I know there's other people there. I want to thank Ted Kuzer, who was at that La Casa de Maria poetry retreat so long ago, because I loved what he had to say. If you're interested in accessible yet deep poetry, pick up a book by Ted Kruser. So on this Soldier's Daughter book, I don't know where I got the nerve, but I wrote to him and I said, would you write a blurb for the back? Which he did. And I have to, for anyone who writes, you know the experience of having someone you idolize give you a boost. And I want to thank Ellen Kelly, whose writing group I was in for a number of years before I started my own. And she is a master. She has an eye and an ear for form, for syntax, for how a poem lands. But largely, she challenges a poet by saying, is this really what you meant to say? Is there more under this? And so often there was. And so she was a great help in that way. And Enid, who's been my booster ever since Naming Water came out, Laurent, who helped me, Laurent Bosselar, who's our former poet laureate, helped me with how to put a book together anyway. And certainly, again, my writing group. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, you've mentioned Barry Spacks a couple of times, and he gave a workshop the year that I was in SCWriP.
Yeah.
That's what got me started writing poetry. So we thought it would be fun to share one of his poems. So let me see if I can share my screen and do that.
And I'll let you do. There it is.
There it is. Okay.
Poem. Will it come again like this? Will we ever get it right? It is always as it is, and it passes. Never as it was, yet always somehow bright, always somehow sweet in its changes. We will never get it right. It will come, but not like this. It is always as it is, and it changes. So that kind of goes along with what next for me. I'm waiting to see the changes that are coming.
Yeah. And that poem reminds me too, to put a plug in. I have that poem right now in my poetry box in my front yard. I live in Ventura on South Dunning Street. So if anybody wants to come by and see the poetry box, I know most of you are in Santa Barbara, but it's really fun. The poem changes about every 2 weeks.
Right there in every dog walker's face.
That's right.
People are reading poetry that didn't even know it before. Great idea, Kim.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn us back over to Nicole. I think we have some little time for questions. I hope answers to those questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both.
Nicole, your voice is very faded.
Okay. I may not be able to fix that. I do see Amada has a question. So if Amada, you want to go ahead and ask, and then either Luis or Tim, if either of you want to chime in if my voice is not audible. I appreciate it. Thank you. And Amada, you are muted.
Unmute.
Okay.
Unmuted. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I love what you guys have told so far. But one thing I'm wondering about is if you have your group, your writing group for writing poetry, who does the critiquing of your poems to make them even better than they first come out?
That's a really good question. sometimes it's a friend, but it's not anything formal. The group is really for, greasing the wheels. And and we don't really just write poetry. We write memoir, we write whatever comes to us. And then many of us work on that writing into a poem, but we don't do editing as a group.
But you concentrate on poetry, is that right?
Most of the people in it are poets, but they don't have to be. Yeah.
And I will say, when we put out our anthologies, we did a bit of editing at that
That's
point. Right. But yeah, the writing group is really generative and not critique oriented. And then some of the people in the writing group are in Ellen Kelly's group, so they get some editing and critiquing there.
Ellen calls it revisioning, as though there is a hyphen in the middle, so that the visioning part and the re-part are much more understandable, because you're looking again, revisioning.
Instead of revising, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
I like that.
It looks like we have a question from David Lopez. David, if you want to unmute and just read or say your question, it's kind of nice to be able to see who's asking the question.
Hey there, sorry about that. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the writing and the sharing. I teach 6th grade English language arts, and I don't know, wisely or foolishly wait until April for National Poetry Month to teach my students poetry. We do reading and writing. So I was just wondering a suggestion from the group as far as weaving it in earlier in the year. We're back in school in person, and the whole COVID year was kind of traumatic for a lot of students, and I just figured that we could use poetry to kind of let the steam out and kind of express ourselves better. So just any suggestions for maybe weaving in poetry instead of waiting until National Poetry Month? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer that first, Lois, and then you give your 2 cents. But I was an elementary school teacher for about 20 years, and I always had the goal of doing at least one poem a month. And then sometimes that didn't happen because there was so much else to teach. But I found when I could do that, it was so worthwhile. And you build this culture where the kids love poetry. When you say, we're going to write a poem, they get so excited. And you said you're 5th grade or 6th grade?
6th grade, 11th grade.
Yeah. So there's so many possibilities. Lois, do you have something off the top of your head?
What I would suggest, and to everyone who's interested, there is so much online about working with children and young people with poetry. And I've gotten a lot of ideas from that. And I would, take a look at that. Take a look at that.
Yeah, and a book to recommend. I just heard Billy Collins recommend this book too. Rose, Where Did You Get That Read? By Kenneth Coach. And so that has some great ideas too.
Yeah, that's actually for the younger grades.
I don't know. It's got some William Blake in here, and
whoa,
it's
okay.
pretty high level. It's pretty high level. William Carlos Williams. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I took a screenshot. That's really cool. Yeah, and you know what? A lot of these kids haven't been back in the classroom for a year and a half. So I figure I'm doing a lot of reteaching, and I figure, I know how emotional we can get, and I know that it's a great stress reliever. My only concern is, we're supposed to be teaching narrative and working on, capital letters and periods and commas. And then I just don't want to say, and so guess what? No more punctuation. So that's my hesitancy. But, I think that if we focus on the distinction between the forms, we should be okay, I think.
Yeah, they'll get it. They'll get it. And they'll be so happy not to worry about punctuation.
Here, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sure. Good luck.
Wonderful. David, just really quick, where are you joining us from?
Oh, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm with the UCLA Writing Project. I was just driving and I couldn't be on the camera. I didn't want to, crash or anything. So sorry if I'm not showing my face. But I've been teaching this is my 19th year starting off actually, and I did the Writing Project in 2012, the year Michael Jackson passed away. It was actually down. Yeah, it was a very unfortunate year, but it was a great time at the Writing Project. So yeah, sorry if I couldn't show myself, but thanks again for this. It was a really wonderful opportunity.
Wonderful.
Great.
We have another question from Richard. Richard, do you want to unmute and just share your question?
When do you know when a poem is fully cooked?
Good. That is really a good question. I think there's many answers to that. I'm thinking of a poem I wrote that Enid Osborne, who's here today, helped me with, and it was an experience of seeing a barn owl on my street, standing next to a rain puddle, and that poem went through 12 iterations, and sometimes I put them all up on the whiteboard for the kids to see, so that they remember that there is something called a first draft, and that's anyone could write that, and then the next draft is your own, and the next, and the next, and the next. So I'd say when you're satisfied with it, when you feel you've really, honestly, in your heart, felt like you've said what you wanted to. You can also share it with friends you write with, or your spouse, but be careful about that, because a lot of people have been trained to look at a poem in a critical way, and what you might get back is, I don't know, I don't like the first line. Be careful who you choose to show it to, but that can be very helpful. Yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, like a painting or any creative form. That's just a decision you make that it's done. But I don't know, for me, it can change too. I'll think, oh, this is great. And then go back and say, no, it needs more work. So yeah, you do have to look at it many times, as you said, Lois.
And I've heard many published poets say that when a poem is in a book they've published, say, no, I would have changed this or that. In that sense, it's never really done.
Yeah.
And it's changing.
Yes.
Thank you. I feel like that's one of the age-old questions that all of us hold for all of our writing. And Tim has his hand up. Why don't you chime in, sir?
So I'll go to another age-old question, and that's about time. And so one of the things I love.
You froze for a minute, Tim.
Oh, sorry. One of the things I love that you guys have shared is that your writing group is time you've carved out for the generative part. And this was touched on earlier, but how do you find the time to do the other parts? And Kim, I'm particularly thinking of you and your years in the classroom. No teacher has enough time. How did you find time, besides the writing group time, to work as a poet?
Great question. Yeah.
Well, I'm retired. Does that answer your question? It was difficult.
Before you retired,
Yes.
were you?
Gosh, I have to say I'm not one of these people that just gets up and has a routine and says I'm going to do this every Tuesday or every day. So it helps me if I have a goal or a deadline, then I will go back and be, ready to do the revisioning, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not a disciplined person as far as my writing goes. I mean, not like poets who had so many gotten up at 5 o'clock so they can do their writing before their kids wake up or before they have to go to work as an insurance agent, etc. I try to write a haiku, just a little short something every morning, and often I get so interested in it that I want to go back to it. So it's a kind of I take a coffee break with what I've written, and I'm lucky. I don't work full time, and that like Tim, you work full time and you have a family. You have young children. It's difficult.
Yeah.
But stash those writings away, and someday you'll pull them out and go, oh yeah, I'm going to work on this.
Thanks for the encouragement. And those young children aren't as young as they once were. They're both in high school.
Woo!
Oh my goodness.
Is that giving you more time or less time?
More gray hair.
Uh-huh.
I want to play off. I'm looking, just scanning to see if there's any other hands up right now. Any questions in the chat? Not right this second. Amada, did you have a second one you wanted to add
No,
in?
you go ahead if you have something you wanted to say now.
Well, I was just going to do a kind of a different age-old theme, maybe not as much of a question, but something I heard coming through very two strong themes were, one, the role of mentors, and two, the role of writing communities, which I imagine in many cases, the people in the writing communities become the mentors, and we mentor each other. But I just wanted to kind of put that question. I know we spoke a lot about all the writing communities that both of you have been a part of, and in some cases formed. Any thoughts or advice for people who maybe haven't enrolled in one yet, or who haven't found that writing mentor yet? I mean, any advice for those people who may be on the cusp of, or on the growth edge of, what if I did a writing group?
That's a really good question. I've had friends, and I'm sure you have too, Lois, that they hear about our writing group and they say, oh, I want to do that. But, how do you actually get that going? How do you start it? I mean, Lois, you've done it. What's your advice?
I say, okay, go ahead, start one. You have friends who want to be in a group. You know people who like to write poetry or memoir or whatever. Let's go. And I say that because I found that for a couple of years I was thinking, oh yeah, I'd like to be in a writing group. And when Nancy Lee finally said, well, why don't you start one? And starting one, you become a magnet and people will show up. I promise.
That is the perfect advice. Tim and I just earlier today we got lucky today, and he and Luis and I are all we're all in the office today. It's the first time since COVID that all three of us have been here together. We're in different rooms, but to see each other's faces today. But earlier today we were talking about that. There's a video that I've shown a few times. Some people who've seen me present something where there's like a leader who's kind of dancing by himself. And that leader then gets a follower, and that causes that movement. And so, Lois, it's to your point. It's just just be that leader, be that lone nut who goes, hey, I want to do this. And to your amazement, people will.
Yeah. Nicole, I'll add that when I decided, yeah, let's try this, I put the word out to all the fellows, all who had been through the SCWriP Institute, and Joni Chancer and Gabby Edwards, who both did the Institute, in the late 90s, they both said, yeah, let's do it. So that's a really good way, and you have access to that. Any of the fellows do. It makes a very good core, because they're already used to the fact that writers need to write and share.
And so I guess in my title I gave myself once was Chief Empowerment Officer. So I'm just here empowering anyone here who is listening now or in the future that if you want to be that voice who says, hey, anyone want to start a writing group? I can, as Lois pointed out, people are going to probably say yes. And I imagine that there are many people who have that same secret longing that you do and just haven't raised their hand yet. So myself or Tim or Luis, you can reach out to any of us and say, hey, I want to put that call out, and we'd be happy to include it anytime, every time in our go out.
And I wanted to say too, Amada, you have a writing group, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add about how that's happened for you?
Yes, I went to a workshop in Texas, in Macondo, with Sandra Cisneros, and she talked about her writing group, and she's the one who wrote House on Mango Street, which most people are familiar with. And I came back from that all fired up because I wanted to start my own writing group. And I talked to another person who's not a SCWriP fellow at a party. And she also wanted to to be in a writing group or start a writing group. So we just said, let's just do it. You invite 2 people, I invite 2 people, and let's just gather at Barnes and Noble and let's just do it. And so that's how we started. That it was that simple. However, my 2 people didn't show up. Her 2 people did. And then they proceeded to invite a few other people. And so it became a really diverse group. And it was absolutely wonderful. We started having writing retreats, and Lori and I saw each other at a store. And we talked about it, and I asked her, are you in a writing group? And she said no. And she hadn't been to SCWriP yet. And she said, and I asked her, would you like to be in ours? And so we just grew, and we've been together, a core of us, for over 12 years. I think it's more like 14 years or something like that. And we have writing retreats, which are wonderful. And we've gone all over the world. Some of us, Lori and I, were together in New Zealand with another 2 women from our group. I've been to Paris with another one, just 2 buddies writing together for a month. And we've done lots of different things. Sometimes if we can't organize one somewhere else, one of us will contribute our home, because writing in someone else's home is different than writing in your own home. So we spread out, and we only talk during lunch. We just have a lunch, and sometimes we stay and do a dinner as well. So we do all kinds of wonderful things, and our writing group has become really an interesting group of women. It's been all women. I've had men ask, and I've wanted to start, what is it called? Men and women and whoever else, a really diverse group. But I haven't done that yet. So I would like to do that again. Yes.
Thanks, Amada. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to go to New Zealand.
When was it, Lori? 2010?
What?
Lori, was it 2010 that we went to New Zealand? You're muted.
I don't remember either.
You don't remember? I think it was 2010.
Great. Well, Amada, we are so grateful to have you here sharing this experience. And quick note, I see one more question here, but just a quick note that if you loved hearing what Amada was saying right now, come back next week, because guess who's going to be speaking? Amada and Lori.
Lori and I will be speaking.
Yes. So there were two quick things. Lori had a message and was just wondering the name of the Santa Barbara Poet Group. The Santa Barbara Library Poetry Reading Group.
The name of it? Yeah, it's the one where we share our favorite poem, a favorite poem, is called, we've shortened it, Favorite Poem Project, to the Faves. So if you look on the library site, you can look under the Faves or Favorite Poem Project, either one.
Great. And C, you have a question. This will be our last one before we wrap for the day.
Yes, hi. This has been so fun to hear you guys share, and really eye-opening for me. But you know what I realized is that I want to ask you both, who of the established poets are your poetic influences, or who have influenced you the most? Thanks.
I think mine have changed over the years as I've changed. I think I started out loving Mary Oliver, who I still love, and Billy Collins, who's just a very accessible, wonderful poet. And then moving on to Stephen Dunn, who writes a lot about relationships and writes beautifully. And then our local poet, Laurent Bosselar, who has about 5 books out and teaches remotely at quite a few East Coast schools. How about you, Kim?
Well, definitely, I would say Billy Collins and Mary Oliver. And I would add to that, I love Ellen Bass, Jane Hirshfield. I love Jack Gilbert. And then a newer poet, Kate Baer, I think is how you say her name. It's Baer. She has a book out called What Kind of Woman? And she has another book coming out that's all kind of blackout poetry. She's taken these horrible messages that people sent her on Instagram about her weight or her political views, and then she just edits them down to beautiful poems. And that one is coming out in the fall, and it's called I Hope This Finds You Well. So I love her. What Kind of Woman is her first book.
Thanks for sharing that.
Great question. I think Lois and Kim, if you want to just shoot Louise the list that you just gave, we can include it as part of the resources on the we send out afterwards. I think that hearing wonderful poets and then hearing who they're inspired by, once in a while you pick up a new poet that way that you get to also be inspired by.
Yes.
So thank you to Lois and to Kim for their really rich talk, to all the participants for being here.